So logically, if you're stuck in the middle of the forest, you're going to take precautions to get to minimize how wet you get, right? Because as it gets later, your clothes are not going to dry, and you're going to have to spend all night in wet clothes, right? Now, I had been being somewhat careful before about crossing, trying at least not to get like my upper torso wet and just get like the, my pant legs wet. But as I panicked, I was like just jumping in the river, basically, and just getting completely soaked from head to toe. And my thinking was like, I just gotta get somewhere quick. Like I gotta I don't have time to roll up my pant legs. I just gotta jump in the river, because that's gonna, I just like that was panic. That was panic, right? So now we're totally soaked. And we decide, okay, we're not gonna find this crazy guy's trail. We gotta head back. So we start heading back, knowing that it's at least like 3 hours, and it's probably around 4 now. And so at this point, we're seriously talking about how we're gonna survive a night at a 3,000-foot elevation, wet, with minimal clothing and no food. And then we're trying to like logically discuss, we try to calm ourselves down, discuss like, is it possible to survive that? Like, for what? Like, and this is when I start thinking, about when you hear somebody who died in the wilderness, like on TV, and you hear like some guys, got lost in the mountains with no food or water, just in a t-shirt and shorts, and they died. And you can't, and you think, well, what the hell were they doing out in the wilderness without food or water in like t-shirts and shorts? Like, you can't even feel bad for someone that stupid. Like, you can't feel bad for someone who died in the wilderness like that. They're just unprepared. And now we're those guys. Like, we're those guys, and I can't even feel sorry for myself. I just feel like an idiot. Like, how could I be 34 years old, following my friend like into the, forest for hours against my better judgment, following like the directions of people that I can't even understand what they're saying, and now it's gonna kill me. Like, now I'm going to be punished for that. So after panic comes a kind of peace, like in your mind, where you think, I'm gonna die in the wilderness, and it's okay. I just hope it happens really quick. Now, the funny thing about this river valley is that walking the way we were heading, the wind was at our backs, and you couldn't really feel it so much, or maybe just the wind hadn't started yet. But now that we're turning around, and it's like 4:30 or so probably, there's like a chilly wind blowing at us, and we're wet, and it's highly unpleasant. But we're sane now. We're kind of sane, and at this point I start thinking, you know what? It's not a good idea to be totally soaked and spending the night in the forest. So for this next river crossing, I'm going to take my pants off and like just put them over my shoulder. And I'm going to cross the river naked, because that way it'll save my pants from getting even more soaked. And I do that. I'm naked with just my pants on my shoulder and my stick, digging it into the sand as I try to maneuver my way across the river. And I'm serious, like, this river is scary. Like, now we're way out in the woods. I'm sure no 4-year-old is crossing this river. These are like rapids, like the kind of rapids that if you were on a raft, you'd be like, oh no, rapids. But we're like walking across them because we have no other choice. Like, that's the only way to get across to an area where you can walk. So anyway, I'm naked crossing the river. And there's so many river crossings every couple minutes that I decide, why put my pants back on? I'm just going to walk naked, like, to the next river. Otherwise, we're wasting valuable time while it gets dark. So I'm walking in the wilderness half naked with just my shirt on and my wet pants on my shoulder, crossing the river, in like this very peculiar state of mind, half panic and half serene, at peace with the death that awaits me. And then we find a trail. And this trail goes like above the river. And we walk on it and we're praying, God, please do not let this trail like end. So we have to go back down and cross the river. Because once you're crossing the river, you can spend hours and go almost nowhere. But on this trail, we're like walking, passing this area that took us, an hour to cross, and we're making pretty good time. And we're now thinking we might survive. We might make it back. And we have a burst of sort of, like happiness and joy, and we might survive. And then I think, you know what, Gary, like we can't find any, we haven't been able to find any trails, like we've obviously missed the right trail on several occasions, because when you're walking along this river, it's so hard that you basically have to look right in front of you. And then I start thinking, well, where did we start this hike? Like, all I remember is we started and we're hiking on the river. Where did we start? Gary, he doesn't remember. What if we pass the place we started because it's getting dark and we're just looking in front of us, trying as hard as we can to get, ahead? What if we pass that trail and we just go further, deeper into the wilderness the other way, the wrong way? How are we ever going to know, like, that we're back? Because I remember we had to, like, kind of go down a path to get to the river. Now, how are we going to see that path? If we don't see that path, we're definitely screwed. We kept walking along that high path, passing the river. And then it all started to make sense, the 4-year-old, only 4 river crossings. This is the path, like this is the way. It's the path to the promised land of our car in a parking lot. And we kept walking above the river. And then finally, at one point we had to come back down to the riverside and we had to make 4 river crossings. But at this point, we're thinking, I think we're pretty close. And like, it's starting to get a little bit dark, but we can still see. And now we had to make the decision, like, do we take this last like 20 minutes of daylight to find like a shelter and try to find like a place under, a bush or something where we might survive and where like the wind's not so bad? Or do we take this 20 minutes and try to go as far as we can and see if we can make it? And we decided to keep going. And we came to the beginning of the trail. And it turned out, we couldn't remember it, but it turned out there was no missing it. Like, there was a point where there's people camped there and stuff, and we were back. There were people. We were safe. The gold panner, he was just packing his stuff in and heading up. And we started talking to the gold panner, and we told him what happened. And he said, oh, that same kind of thing happened to me. The same thing happened to me like a year ago. I went out hiking here, and I thought I knew where I was going. I didn't. I ended up stuck there. I panicked, and I barely made it back in time. Didn't say anything like that on the little internet site. But anyway, needless to say, we made it back. and we got back in our car and we're freezing. We turned the heat on and we were like, okay, we're alive. We're alive. And Gary says to me, we got to research it a little more and come back again and go to the bridge. And I say, no, we don't.